We are live. It is Monday Night Spark on a Wednesday, and I have a special guest for you guys tonight. I'm super pumped about tonight's episode. We are talking running shoes, everything about running shoes. So, are you a runner who has struggled in the past to find the right running shoe? Do you get a shoe and then you figure out it caused you foot pain or you got a blister from it and you just don't know what the right shoe is for you? So, in this episode, we are talking about running shoes with our special guest, Matt Santillo from Woodbridge Running Company. It is a running shoe and specialty store. What we're going to be covering in this live is many questions that Matt gets on an everyday basis, such as how long should you what is the wear life of your running shoes? Or how do you know if you need a new pair of shoes? And is it okay to put your running shoes, your stinky running shoes, in the washing machine to clean them? So what I want you guys to do, if you're coming on here on the live within our Healthy Runner Facebook group, is just to type in live into the comment box so I know you're with me. And then also drop your running shoe questions in the comment box and Matt will answer them during this live. So Matt, if you can, give us a little kind of backstory of who you are. What is your running history? Why do you love running? And why do you enjoy helping runners with their shoe selection?
Hi, first off, hi, Dwayne. Thanks for having me on the show. This is really cool. I've never done anything like this before. My name is, once again, Matt Santillo. I'm the manager at the Woodbridge Running Company. I've been running for about 30 plus years. I originally got into it in high school. I had a brother who was a little bit younger than me, who was like the first I have three brothers and we all ended up being runners, but he was the first to kind of get into cross country and track. And after, doing the team sport game in terms of soccer and those kinds of things, eventually I found my way to running, just because I'm super competitive with him and wanted to beat him. So that just, competition is one of the biggest things in terms of that's always got me into running. Another thing is that you can do it by yourself. You don't have to, I've always, back in those high school days, you're trying to put together kids to play a pickup football game or a pickup basketball game. And all of a sudden you've got five and you're struggling to get a sixth or something like that. And you got to, try and wrangle guys up on the phone back, before the cell phone days. So running is something that you can do whenever you want to, whenever the mood strikes you. You can go wherever you want. It's a good way sometimes, especially if you're in a new area. Whenever I've moved to a different city, it's always been a great way for me to kind of find and see new places. So it's just something that I've just felt like I've been born to do.
That's awesome, Matt. Now, how long have you been at Woodbridge Running Company?
I've been at Woodbridge Running Company. It'll be 10 years in, I believe, July.
Sorry, Matt, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay, sorry. I lost your audio there. Sorry about
Okay.
that. So you've been there for 10 years, you said?
Just about almost 10 years. Yeah.
Awesome. And then I guess just random kind of running question here for you is what is your favorite distance to run now?
That's a good question because I kind of, go back and forth on that. Definitely as I'm starting to get a little bit older, I would probably say 5Ks because they're over a lot quicker and you don't suffer quite as much. And it's a distance that you can, you don't have to fully, you have to be somewhat trained for it, but you can kind of cheat a 5K. You can't cheat a half marathon. You can't cheat longer distances because, eventually you get out there and you're pushing yourself. But I like all types of distances. I run with the Milford Road Runners. And they have a USATF Road Series team. So we run against other USATF teams throughout the state. And we do distances anywhere from a mile all the way up to half marathon. So, I'm pretty much at every race every year. So it's always, and I'm you never stop learning in terms of how to kind of train for things. So that's I'm always kind of playing around with new training regimens, and thinking about how different ways that I can kind of train for certain distances. So it keeps it fresh, even though you sometimes tend to do the same races every year and every year in and year out.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, no doubt. So I just want to give a shout out to some people who jumped on here on the live. Eddie's here on the live. Deb's here on the live. Liz is here. Lily's here. Trish is here. So thank you guys for jumping on live. Type in any of your running sneaker questions into the comment box, and Matt will be happy to answer them. So we're going to start out with a question that he hears quite frequently, and that is, how much wear or life can we expect from our running shoes?
All right, so this is seeing how you would ask me for a couple of questions. This is by far the most frequent question. There isn't a short answer and a long answer. I'll give you the short answer first. Generally we say a rule of thumb, you're looking at anywhere in terms of about 400 to almost 500 miles. Or you could go by, if you're not tracking your mileage, you could go by a time frame, and that's generally, if you're somebody who's running pretty consistently, 4 or 5 days a week, you're looking at about 6 months. Now, the more kind of complex answer it really kind of depends on there's a lot of variables. It depends on if you figure out kind of what kind of a striker you are, whether you're very heavy on the heel or very, very heavy on the forefoot. What kind of surfaces you're running on. If you're consistently kind of really hitting it on sidewalks or roads, those are much harder surfaces, so you're going to break down the shoe quicker. Trails and big grass are definitely a little bit softer, or if you're on a track. I can tell you from my own personal experience, I tend to kind of wear 2 different shoes at the same time. So I alternate between the 2 shoes. It's been proven that when you run in a shoe, if you then let it rest for 24 hours, the foam in the shoe bounces back. Unlike where if you're constantly running in the same shoe, it's constantly gets flattened down and doesn't get that chance to kind of refresh. So I have been doing this for quite a while. I think I may have read this in Runner's World a long time ago or something like that. And it's just something that I tend to do. I tend to stagger my shoes too. So, when I'm halfway through the lifespan of one shoe, I introduce the new shoe in. So when I have long runs, the new shoe goes with the longer runs. The older shoe is saved for the shorter runs because it's just, getting towards the end of its lifespan. So that I would say, and there's a lot of kind of variables that kind of work in on those, but yeah, that's definitely the longer answer.
Yeah, so you would say about 400 to 500 miles,
Yeah,
or every 6 months?
generally. Now, I can tell
Okay.
you from my personal experience, I'm a little heavier, a 4-foot runner. So I tend to kind of cut mine off a little earlier than that. I'm more like 350, 400. You could take a look at shoes that I have, and the heels can be like immaculate, or even the midfoot can be immaculate, but there's circular spot up towards the forefoot where I just kind of beat that, especially really on my right foot. And after a while, it just feels like there's like nothing there, and it's extremely uncomfortable. So I tend to be a little bit more kind of cut my shoes off a little bit quicker. But, we're all different. I can tell you there's some people who can handle pain much easier. I'll give you a short little story. I think this was probably like 2 or 3 years ago. I had a young lady come in, and she was training for a marathon. And I think she was like a month out from the marathon. And she goes, yeah, I think I need a new pair of shoes. I've been running in these most of my training. She takes the shoes off, and there is a nice circular hole in the midfoot area where she has blown through the blown rubber, and then she's blown through the foam. You're just about at the point where you could stick your finger through it. And she's like, yeah, I did a 22 miler on this shoe yesterday. And I'm like looking at her and I'm like, if I had done that, I would be in the hospital. I probably would have broken my foot, but she was fine with it. I don't know how, but at least she realized she needed a new shoe for the marathon.
Right, right. Wow, that is pretty remarkable. So there are some people within, maybe you're listening to the Healthy Runner podcast here, and you might be new to running. And I know with this whole coronavirus crisis, there are a lot more new runners out there since everything else has been closed. Running is one of those things that you can keep your social distance and be able to do during this difficult time. So if you are a new runner, one thing that I found helpful to kind of track the mileage that Matt's talking about is most of your running apps nowadays that are you're tracking your mileage when you go out for a run can enter in shoes. So I will personally, once I go see Matt and I get my new Hocus, and then I will put like the Hoka Kavu or the Hoka Clifton, and then I'll put the date, and that will tell me kind of like that was the shoe that I bought on that date, and then that's when I start tracking. So that makes it a little easier, especially if you are changing with two different shoes, as Matt was saying, and that's also another point that I've heard before, Matt, in some journals that I've read years ago about the foam and the density and the bounce back. And also related to that, since it is hopefully starting in Connecticut to get a little warmer, is in the heat, especially in the summer months, as well as not leaving your running shoes like in your car during the day. For those of you guys who go out for a run, then maybe go right to the office or go to work and you leave your running sneakers in a hot car that's like sitting in a parking lot on an 80, 90-degree day, and you're inside your car is like 100 and something degrees. I've heard that's not good for the foam either in terms of wear, and maybe that might decrease some of the longevity of your running sneaker. Have you heard that as well?
I've heard maybe a little bit of something like that before. It definitely makes a lot of sense that you don't really want to put your shoes under kind of extreme conditions like that. I probably have heard that more with leaving it in your car when it's like free, when it's really, really cold. Because I have actually done that sometimes where I've left a pair of shoes in like December or January, and then you go to a race in the morning and you first throw the shoe on and it's very, very stiff. And it isn't until you've actually kind of running it for a little while that it then kind of softens up again. So I would think that it would probably work at the other extreme too, where you don't want to gotta get them too hot.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And Katrina brings up a good point. She says, write the date you started running in permanent marker on the sole of the shoe.
We do have a decent amount of customers who do that, especially on the white section.
I like that. That's a good tip here. So we have a question. If all right, so we have a question here that I started running in the woods and on some gravel paths and trails, but I'm no Barkley runner. Are my road running shoes enough, or should I get evaluated for trail shoes?
So the thing that I would say to something like that is, depending on the trail that you're in, as long as it's not like too technical, not too rocky, I would say that any traditional kind of running shoe should be fine for that. The one thing that I would say to the question about that is, how do you feel afterwards? Are you having a lot of discomfort around your ankles? Because sometimes with a trail shoe, you're going to get a little bit more kind of ankle support. So that way you're not kind of like straining the tendons or having, a little bit of unsecureness with your ankles. But I would, a bigger thing I say for being on the trails is that you have to really focus a little bit more on bringing your knees up, because you don't want to kind of clip a root or clip a rock and then you kind of get unstable and trip or something like that. So that's probably the biggest thing.
That's a great answer. Thank you, Matt. So I have an inside only pair of shoes, Trisha says. Is this recommended to have kind of one sneaker, I guess, for doing maybe indoor treadmill work and then maybe one shoe for only outdoor work? Have you heard of any
I
runners doing
have
that?
heard of people who do that. Yes. Yeah, I think that's perfectly fine. I know, especially for a lot of people who run at gyms, they want you to kind of have clean shoes on when you go to the gym. They don't want you kind of, coming in from having like a muddy shoe or something like that, a dry mud on the bottom, and then you go to the treadmill at the gym and you start running, and the dry dirt comes off onto the treadmill. So that makes a perfect sense. I don't think there's any issue with that. I think that's perfectly fine.
Excellent, excellent. So now, how do we actually know? So you gave us some guidelines on number of months or number of miles around about that we should be getting a new pair of running shoes. So how do we know if we in fact need a new pair?
All right. So a lot of times your body will kind of tell you when something like that is needed. More times than not, when you are running in a shoe that is starting to really get beat up and near the end of its lifespan or at the end of its running lifespan, you will experience tenderness either underneath the kneecap, or you'll start to kind of feel a little bit more kind of shin discomfort. Uh, those are mainly kind of your body's way of letting you know that the cushioning that was previously in the shoe, or that the shock that the shoe was absorbing, it's no longer doing, and now it's your legs and your lower body that are absorbing the shock. Another thing that you can kind of do is kind of examine the shoe. If you see on the blown rubber on the outsole, if you really have kind of worn it away pretty severely, that's a telltale sign. And then also, especially if you notice any kind of real strike points that you have on the shoe, if you push in on those strike points, if you can really kind of push and flex the shoe a lot, then and it's really, really soft, that's letting you know that the shoe just doesn't have the kind of meat to it that it previously had, so that it could absorb the shock.
Nice. So those are all great points. And I think that's important for us to know as runners because we, like Matt said before, there are so many different variables that go into, you want to think about like your body weight as well. And in addition to how hard you do strike the ground. So I think, there's some general guidelines in terms of mileage, but I know myself too. There's been times where I've replaced my shoes at about 300 miles, and I've replaced them just because I wasn't feeling the support and I started getting some shin symptoms. And then the other thing to note with, definitely with myself being a physical therapist and evaluating a lot of runners who have pain and who have shin splints and who have that runner's knee and the kneecap pain in the front of your knee. That's one thing that I always ask and evaluate is, what shoes are you running in first off? And then is this a new pair? Are you tracking your mileage? So those are questions that I'm always asking the runners that I see. And you'll be surprised how many don't track their mileage and, are not sure how they've been running in them. And a lot of times I find that that's a contributing factor. So it's not only the kind of physical things that can cause those injuries, but it is multifactorial in that, you have to take in the running shoes into account in addition to the person's body physically. So like what I look at for shin splints or knee pain is, what muscles are weak and look at you move, look at you run and see, are there mechanical faults with your running technique? And we go through a full kind of running analysis and then prescribe you the specific exercises, strengthen those areas. But sometimes it's as simple as literally asking the shoe question and asking them, how long they've had them or are they new shoes? And sometimes I'm surprised at how many runners don't actually correlate those two together. And they think, oh, my pain started here and it's because of this. And then I start, going down that road and asking about the shoes. And they're like, oh, yes, my pain started 2 months ago. That's right. That's when I did get these shoes. And, they don't put kind of two and two together. And I'm surprised at how many runners also, and I'm sure we're going to get into this in terms of foot type, but are in the maybe not the right shoe or the best shoe for their specific foot type. So just to kind of catch up on some of the comments here, Sundar's here on the live. Thank you for tuning in. Appreciate it. Rachel's here. Good to see you. So Sundar says that he rotates his shoes between his long runs and his short runs. However, he started noting that in one of the shoes, which is less than 250 miles, he's seeing some wear and tear in the heel. This is the first time he's experienced this. Usually he will see it after 300 miles. So it's interesting, Sundar. So let us know, is this a new model shoe, or have you had any significant changes in your training in terms of, have you been doing more hills? I know you usually do a lot of hills with your running, or have you really ramped up, I guess, your miles in the duration that you would normally be? Because those would be some of my thoughts. Do you have anything to add to that, Matt?
I would definitely say, Dwayne, that's a good suggestion in terms of whether that is a model of shoe that he's running before, because not every shoe even is the same. There are going to be structurally just a little bit different between companies, even when they are within the same category of stability shoes or neutral shoes, they will make your biomechanics change a little bit differently. I can tell you that's one reason why when I do tend to run in two shoes, I run in two different shoes, because biomechanically, I'm not always striking in exactly the same spots. So a chance for a stress reaction or an overuse injury is minimized because each shoe is making me strike just a little bit differently.
Nice, nice. So before we get to the washing machine question, because that's actually a question I have, and I really want to hear your answer, but you kind of mentioned neutral shoe, stability shoe. Can we just go over that real quick in case, like I said, we probably have some new runners listening and aren't really aware of the categories. What are the general categories of running shoes?
Sure. So the main two categories are neutral and stability. A neutral shoe is just a regular running shoe that does not have any kind of added features to try and control your biomechanics. So it is just a regular kind of cushion shoe that is there to kind of give you some nice kind of cushioning and maybe just a little bit of guidance. They're going to have a little bit of flexibility to it. You don't want too much flexibility because, especially if you're going to be doing a decent amount of mileage, you want something that has, a little bit of rigidity to it. Now, a stability shoe is going to be much more rigid. That is kind of designed to really kind of control your biomechanics, whether because you have a little bit of a flatter foot and you tend to kind of overpronate, or you just kind of need just a little bit more support. Now, when I say overpronate, what we're generally talking about is when somebody tends to kind of have a flatter arch. What happens is that when the foot comes down and hit and strikes with the surface of the ground, the arch tends to kind of collapse. And when it collapses, it tends to kind of roll inwards. And that rolling inwards, that those biomechanics, that can kind of throw off your equilibrium, throw off your alignment, so that can kind of lead to injuries. So with the stability shoe, they're trying to prevent that from happening to keep you more properly aligned.
Nice. So, yeah, no, thank you very much for breaking that down. I think you did an awesome job with that. Now, have they gotten away from like the motion control shoes? Do they not even make those anymore?
They still do make motion control shoes. It is basically been a little bit of a dying category. But we still do have a model or two that we sell. It tends to be those individuals who really kind of overpronate severely, or it tends to be somebody who is a little bit heavier, who really wants like a lot of support and a lot of cushioning. But for the most part, most companies are, they still kind of carry a model, but so much is kind of developed within different levels of stability shoes that they kind of tend to be going in those directions.
Yeah, I remember when I first graduated from PT school, I think it's 17 years now, that was the big trend and the fad back then. And that was when, the mindset was overpronation is just bad and we want to avoid all overpronation at all. And now the pendulum, it kind of shifted kind of drastically. And, I'm sure we can get into like the minimalist and barefoot shoe where it kind of shifted in the other direction. But I remember, I was running in the Brooks Beast way back when with custom foot orthotics as well. So just, thinking about how much I was blocking pronation and my foot wasn't like pronating at all. And some pronation is good because it helps dissipate the forces of your body when it actually hits the ground. So
Yes,
I
yeah.
think,
Everybody overpronates. It's what degree that is healthy. That's basically what they're trying to determine with shoes, or trying to control with shoes.
yeah. So what I see in a lot of the runners that I help, and I actually saw someone today where we were looking at, she was in more of a neutral shoe, and for her and her foot type, and then looking at her running, she's excessively pronating in that shoe. So my recommendation was something a little bit more firmer, like a stability shoe, to kind of help prevent the excessive pronation that she's having. So when I look at something, I think about, we can try to make some corrections on the extreme side with a custom foot orthotic or an over the counter foot orthotic like they can get in your store, or use the shoe, but then also address the muscles that help control that movement as well. So are there specific exercises? And if there are, for you guys to know out there, your lower leg muscles are important, your calf muscles, your posterior tib, but then also your hip rotators. So a lot of people forget about them, but your deep hip external rotator muscles are what we call your anti-pronation muscles. And a lot of times, if there's weakness up at the hips, then that causes even more of that pronation motion. So if you're not addressing up the hips, then, you can address it with the sneaker and it might not be enough. So just to kind of keep that in mind, for those of you who are not addressing those areas. So let's get to the washing machine question. How do we clean our running shoes? Can we throw them in the washing machine?
Most running shoes you can throw in the washing machine. I tend to don't recommend it, but I do know of a decent amount of our customers who have done it. I would say, if you have a normal kind of running shoe, something that has an upper that is pretty significant, I would say that you'll probably be fine with it. You definitely don't want to put it into the dryer. That will, the heat in the dryer will sometimes break down the stitching, or will break down the glue that's kind of holding the midsole to the upper, or the midsole to the outsole. So you do definitely want to avoid that. But I tend to tell people, if they really want to kind of clean their shoes, to just take an old toothbrush and some soap and water, and just kind of scrub out wherever the dirt is. That tends to kind of work pretty well.
Yeah, and as Matt mentioned before, and I don't think we explicitly stated this, so I will reiterate that, you want to think of your running shoes as your running shoes. So they're not your go shopping shoes, they're not your gym shoes and your running shoes and go walking in the mall and go, kicking around and playing in the yard. Your running shoes should be strictly used for running. So I don't know how many people care actually when they are running if their sneakers are clean or not. So just keep that in mind. Start to think about, for most of you guys within this Healthy Runner Facebook group or on the Healthy Runner podcast, or maybe you're watching this on the Spark Your Training YouTube channel, then you're most likely watching because you care about your running health, right? And if sneakers and shoes are a part of your health, and if you're not taking care of the shoes, then you can do everything you want for your body, but if you're not taking care of the shoes, then you might still have issues and not, you might run into aches and pains along the way. So think about your running sneakers and your shoes as strictly that, and then consider, just reiterating, two pairs and alternating between, or doing, like I think Sundar mentioned before, doing one for like long runs, and then maybe like I do like a speed work shoe and then a race shoe. Like that's the one I wear for races, that's the one I wear for speed work, and maybe I'll do like a second run during the week in those. And those are traditionally a little bit lighter weight, which aren't as supportive, but they are a little bit lighter weight. So, okay, so we can throw them in the washing machine if we need to, but just don't throw them in the dryer.
Yeah, and definitely not in the dryer. Especially one thing in terms of once you do get the shoes wet, a very easy way to kind of dry them. Especially I would say when putting them through the washing machine, you want to take the insole that's in the shoe and take that out. And if you stuff the shoe with newspaper when it gets wet, that will, and just let it lie out overnight, that sucks all the moisture right out of the shoe. So that's a neat little trick that I picked up. I don't know where, but a lot of people, I mentioned it to them in the store, and they hadn't heard of that before. So that's a way of, if you do have to get that run in, and it's you're running in a downpour or something like that, that's a way to kind of keep the shoe from kind of getting that musky kind of smell if you if you stuff it like right when you're done with it, and it'll dry it up super quick.
Yeah, I've heard that tip before as well, and oh man, that it's a lifesaver, as far as your shoes not being so stinky and then not deforming like in the upper area. So your shoe kind of maintains the form that it needs to be in, and that's what I do after all of my rainy runs. And I know Katrina loves running in the rain, so we've talked about that before. And Gina, thanks for jumping on here. I see Lou's here on the live. And also Ian's here on the live. So thank you guys for jumping on here. Ask Matt any of your running shoe questions that you do have. So let's get to another question that we have here on Facebook. And so Trisha says she has inside workout tread shoes, several outdoor shoes that she rotates with her walking shoes. When I retire a pair of running shoes, they become my errand shoes. Yes. So Trisha, mine become my yard work shoes. Those are my grass cutting shoes after they're done running. And then actually a good thing to note is you can donate, because I feel like this question's popped up in the group many times. You can donate your running shoes. I don't know if you guys saw that post that I made a couple of months ago at Woodbridge Running Company. So they will take your old running sneakers and donate them to a great place. So we have a question on thoughts on lacing, the benefits of the heel lock, or is this just preference and personal?
So a heel lock lacing can really, really help people who have narrow ankles, and sometimes the heel or ankle collar of the shoe, sometimes it's just not tight enough. So dropping the eyelet lace back to that furthest eyelet can really help. I can tell you, since I've started working at the store, I tend to do that with all my shoes now. I drop it out of that. You've got those two eyelets on the top. I drop it out of the front one, and we'll always drop it back to the further one, just to kind of give myself a little bit more secure feeling in the ankle. I find that to be it's extremely helpful. There is a little bit more advanced method in terms of where you use both eyelets and create a loop. If you really, really kind of need your heel to really be locked down, or you find that there's some slipping. However, I can tell you that with my experience, sometimes you may kind of get a slipping or a loose sensation in a shoe, mainly because of what sock you're wearing. So sometimes going to a little bit of a thicker sock can help kind of take up that extra space that's around there and give you a little bit more of a snug fit too. So sometimes I can tell you from myself, over the years, I've acquired numerous different types of socks. And whenever I get a new pair of shoes, I always break out at least 2 or 3 different socks of different thicknesses and try them all on with the shoe to kind of see which sock is going to fit best which shoe. And then once I find which one it is, then I will consistently use that one sock with that shoe. It just, different companies kind of cut their shoes a little bit differently, and some socks just work better with some shoes than others.
Wow. So this is like getting next level here. Matt's really going in depth here. So you see the knowledge this guy has. This is why I love going into the store and just kind of picking his brain every time I go in there. He probably hates all my questions, but he's a wealth of knowledge, and even just getting down to the socks as well. And I remember you helped me out with before winter was coming. I think this was back in it was probably like November when I came in and was asking about winter socks, and the ones that you had recommended that I bought, they worked out really well. So, yeah, you can get pretty in depth with this stuff, right? And this is the difference. And, we'll talk about this later, but this is really the difference, guys. If you are, because I used to be that person that would just kind of shop for my running shoes when I first started running. So those of you that don't know my story, number one, check out episode or the intro episode of the Healthy Runner podcast. You'll hear my whole kind of running story and being an adult onset runner. So it's only been 8 years that I've been running, but I've learned a lot along the way. In the beginning, I used to just, shop for the lowest price and what I can find, and whatever running sneaker looked cool on, Zappos or Amazon, or I don't even think Amazon was really going at that time. But there's really a difference that I really value coming into Woodbridge Running Company and being able to ask Matt these questions and the intricacies and the compare and contrast and trying on different shoes and actually taking them for a test run and going out actually outside in the parking lot and being able to see how they feel on my feet. So that's really, I've noticed such a difference, and I'm not needing to actually return shoes. And, you just order it and it's like, you try it on, you try it out, and then you just return it, and you order another one and you return it. So it's saved me a lot of time and frustration. So I highly recommend you guys. And if you're not around the greater New Haven area, definitely support your local running stores, because like all of us here, we're all dedicated runners, right? And we care about our bodies, and these guys need our support, as well as, just like any small business out there, and especially nowadays, with what's going on with small businesses. So definitely, consider this is like the knowledge that you get when you actually talk to an expert who is helping you out with your shoe selection. So Matt, if it's okay with you, can we get to a couple of questions that people submitted in advance? So this kind of gets a little bit into, or you know what? Let's do this question because we just talked about socks. So Jen wants to know blisters. So can be common. I'm sure you hear these stories all the time. I
Yep.
know I've been there before. Is it the socks or the shoes? What causes blisters?
Uh, Short answer is it can be both. Uh, you know, uh, Not having a high enough quality sock definitely can cause issues. You definitely want to make sure with your sock that it is not 100% cotton, because 100% cotton will absorb moisture, so it keeps it closer to your skin, so a chance of a hot spot or a blister can develop. But there are also sometimes with shoes, because shoes are kind of cut a little bit differently. They can bother certain people. So it's not can sometimes not be an easy answer, and it can kind of take a little bit of kind of trial and error to kind of figure things out.
Yeah, and I think just from the medical side of things, it is blisters are really caused by friction, right? So there's too much friction or pressure in a certain area, and it's going to cause your skin to, you know, there's too much pressure in that area. So then you usually get that kind of swelling, that pocket of swelling that's very painful, too much pressure, and that has definitely happened to me. Unfortunately, actually a funny story, not really funny, but we actually went on vacation to Punta Cana one year, right before the week before the Fairfield half. And because I really wasn't in the sun too much before that, when I was laying in my beach chair, apparently the sun got to the bottom of my feet. So I kind of got a sunburn on the soles of my feet, but apparently your bottoms of your feet don't get red like the rest of your body. So I didn't know I had a sunburn, and my feet just were sensitive. And then once I literally, landed from my flight, and 2 days later was the half, and 2 or 3 miles into it, I felt burning. And then it just was terrible. I had this huge blister by the end. It was the most painful experience ever. Definitely not a good thing to run through a half. But I think it really probably relates to a either sock or shoe. It's a fitting issue, right? So there's excessive shear forces that are happening or pressure points that are happening. So it really needs to, be a fitting issue, whether it's the shoe or the sock, or really those that excessively sweat, right? So
Yes,
like,
yeah, definitely excessive sweating can sometimes play a role also. There definitely are products out there. Body Glide has like a foot glide that you can put on. There are different kind of items that you can kind of help put onto your feet, either like a moleskin or something like that. I have had blisters in the past myself. Of course, we all have. I have found that if you do kind of develop it, it's always helpful to kind of, when you still have to kind of run, to kind of pre-treat the area, because it's something that's kind of bothering you already. So sometimes, before I go for a run, I will put a little bit of petroleum jelly or some sort of a lubricant on that area. Hopefully, maybe be able to sometimes cover it with a Band-Aid, even though Band-Aids don't seem to always kind of stay in place. I'll be in the middle of like a 6 or 7 mile run and I'll feel that Band-Aid moving around in there. So, but yeah, if you are somebody who kind of struggles with those issues, uh, you know, pre-treating it can sometimes really help.
yeah. And so let me just give a little shout out to my Cheshire friends who hopped on here. Keisha's here on the live. Kath is here on the live, and Kathleen M is also here. So thank you guys for tuning in. And Keith is here. So we got a lot of K's that just jumped on the live there. So we also have another question as it relates to the tying of the shoes. Can you tie them too tight? And have you seen this before? Because I know I have. What are your
Yes,
thoughts on that and like injuring yourself?
you can definitely tie your shoes too tight. I have done it myself, where I have tied them too tight, and either will be in the middle of a run and my foot will go numb, or I will sometimes, if you tie it and knot it in the wrong spot, you will kind of have some soreness or pain in the foot after a run. Uh, I've, it's something where you kind of figure out how tight you need to have your shoe the more you kind of run. I don't think there's like a surefire answer. It's kind of just, another one of those trial and error kind of things. But I can tell you with some shoes that I have, instead of like having the knot located right over the middle of the foot, the ceiling of the foot, I will sometimes knot on one of the sides if I've irritated an area, just to kind of make sure that the shoe is still tight, but it's not kind of like squeezing in a spot that I might have previously irritated. So yeah, there are tons of different ways to tie your shoes. I can tell you one thing that I tend to do now with most of my shoes is that up towards not the first eyelet, but the second eyelet up, a lot of companies now are really kind of minimizing their toe boxes. And that is right where people's width start to kind of take effect, the middle 2/3 of your foot. And a lot of times I will skip crossing the lace there and I will just shoot the lace straight up and then cross thereafter. So that way kind of opens up the shoe a little bit more in that area for myself, because there have been at least a couple of shoes where I've felt a little squeezed during runs on that. So you can go. I know from like on the New Balance website, I think there's probably like 100 different ways that you can kind of lace your shoes. So
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And I've actually seen this in a bunch of runners. I just actually virtually evaluated one the other day who this happened to him during a marathon. I'm going to bring my little anatomy guy up here. For those of you watching the video, you can see this. So on the top of your foot, right on the top, these gray things here, these are your extensor tendons. And if you're in the toe box are tied too tight down low, you can actually get like a tendonitis and an irritation of those tendons. And that's actually happened to me before. years ago. And then I've seen a bunch of runners that's happened. And then if you've been diagnosed, let's say with a tendonitis of one of your on the top of your foot, then most likely, honestly, it's probably related to you're tying your sneakers too tight, or it's a shoe fitting issue somehow. And then the other thing that Matt was talking about was the numbness. There's a nerve that comes out right in the front of your ankle, actually. It's your superficial peroneal nerve, and that can be compressed there. And a lot of folks who do like skiing or are in boots can sometimes compress that nerve. But I've also seen some runners, if they tie them too tight up top and have like that excessive heel lock, that they can get a little bit of that numbness and that you're really compressing that nerve, which is located kind of on the surface level. So if you're definitely getting numbness, then you need to, think about some of the changes that Matt's talking about and decrease that, because you don't want to compress a nerve for a long time. All right, so let's get to another question here that we had submitted, and then we're going to wrap things up soon. Matt, thank you so much for your time, and you guys have been awesome here on the live, asking some great questions. I think we could probably ask him for days, but let's get to this because Lou, he mentioned barefoot running and kind of activating the natural mechanisms of like a cushioning shoe. So if going barefoot is too audacious, there's also minimalist shoes. Would you recommend minimalist shoes for racing? He wants to know, and training. So for maybe speed work, maybe a long run or maintenance. So I guess asking what would be best for speed, long run, or maintenance. In fact, he did kind of reference a new little kind of magazine article that I checked out, Lou. And it pretty much said what I think most people are starting to go in that direction. But I guess I'm sure you get this question a lot too, Matt. What are your thoughts on the minimalist shoes and or barefoot running?
Yeah, I think it definitely can work for people. It is, a really good way to kind of help strengthen your feet and your lower legs, when you're running, but you definitely want to be very, very careful about it. I can tell you, going back to my college days, that we have sometimes done some grass work where, after or in the middle of a run, you will take your shoes off and you'll do some striders or something like that, barefoot in the grass. Nowadays you've got the artificial kind of turf surfaces. Those can be really helpful to kind of do some barefoot work on those. I know the Hamden track has it, and sometimes when I go over and do some speed work, I will kind of do some barefoot striders afterwards. But in terms of, for part of his question about whether to get a more kind of minimalist shoe to do some speed work in, or some things like that, yeah, I think those are definitely very, very helpful. If you ever take a look at a racing flat, you'll notice that they're very much like barefoot shoes or very minimalist shoes. They're really designed to be super lightweight. There's not much of a heel drop, and it's just something that's giving you just a little bit of protection. Now, of course, the longer you go for distance, you want to have a little bit more meat on the shoe, because you're going to be doing a lot of slapping on the ground, and you want to have some cushioning to kind of protect that. But I can tell you from myself, working at the store, I get to see a lot of shoes. So I have a lot of shoes at my house here. And besides like the shoes that I run in, I do have a speedwork shoe for the track. And then I do have like racing flats for different distances. I'll have like a racing flat for like a 5K, a racing flat for like 5 miles and up, and then like a racing flat for like a half marathon. So it can be compulsive in terms of when you do a decent amount of running, you can acquire a lot of shoes.
Yeah, I think the big point that I think needs to be had in terms of barefoot or minimalist shoes is most of us don't have the discipline to train down to that. And what I mean by that is if you've been running for a while and you're running 20 something, 30 something miles a week, most of us don't have the discipline to ramp down to literally doing a walk run for a mile a couple of days in a row, allowing your foot to adapt to not having a lot of stability. Because as we've adapted over the number of years that we've been in traditional running shoes, and this kind of talks about a little bit of that, Lou, in the 70s really is when running shoes started to change and there became more cushioning and more supportive. We've all grown up in that. So if you're a youngster, like for our children, if we had them start running barefoot now, they would be able to adapt. So when they're in their 40s, when they're in their 50s, like most of us, then they would be able to run barefoot. I think the problem in that I've seen in a lot of the injured runners that I help is they get stress fractures in the foot, in the tibia, because they've heard that minimalist shoes or barefoot running is better for your body and because it strengthens your muscles, but they don't have the discipline to actually do such a slow, gradual progression back into running. Now, I'm talking about like slow because it takes that long for your body to adapt to the forces that would change and the lack of cushioning that you're going to get every time your foot hits the ground. There's ground reaction forces that come up through your tissues. So that's where I come out of it from kind of that end and ask most of the runners I work with, what have you been running in and how long? And, if let's say you haven't run in 6 months now and you wanted a slow, slow, slow ramp up, then I would say now would be the perfect time to try something with a little less stability and maybe try the minimalist. But the other thing I need to add in there is you need to do specific strengthening exercises for your actual foot muscles. So there are foot specific exercises that you can do, believe it or not, kind of like toe yoga, we call it, or like foot doming, a short foot exercise to strengthen all the muscles on the bottom of your foot, because those are the muscles that are going to actually provide you the stability that your shoe isn't. So that's kind of my take. And a lot of people want to know, like, is it good or is it bad? And I don't think it's good or bad. I think it can be beneficial, but you need to watch your distances. And the question is, can you allow yourself a slow enough ramp up to actually train your body and your muscles to adapt to the forces of running, and then to allow your muscles to actually strengthen in that time period that you're doing that slow ramp up with your miles?
Dwayne, just to piggyback onto that, when we used to sell the Vibram Five Fingers, the toe shoes, and when we did sell those to people or people were interested in them, we always recommended for at least the first 4 to 6 months that they own the shoe to mainly just walk in it first and to gradually, very, 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 very slowly kind of work your way into running. And unfortunately, a lot of people did not do that, and they went right to all of a sudden wearing it right away. And I did see people who really kind of suffered from that.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. And that's what actually, so right now during the coronavirus, for those of you who are new and you haven't been seeing some of my posts in the past, we're actually doing strength training workouts for runners, all online via Zoom, just like this. And 2 of the days, I will do my strength training workouts barefoot because I'm never able to be barefoot when I go to the gym. So I wanted to train my foot muscles, my ankle muscles for more stability because I know it's going to help me as a runner down the road. And we actually had a good question is, so Wednesday, so this morning was actually plyo day. So we do plyometric training, some jump training as part of the workout, but I wear my sneakers still because my body has not adapted yet. So I can't just go to kind of the next level of doing jump training, plyometric training if my muscles aren't strong enough to control that motion, because then I'm just going to get injured, right? And going to get pain. So it takes the body a while to adapt. And then I love your comment about walking around in those shoes. And I've started to, you know, now that we're home all the time, be barefoot more when I'm at my sit to stand station and standing and trying to activate your foot muscles versus traditionally I'm in shoes all day long, from literally, 5 a.m. until 10 p.m. So it's actually a good thing to get out of your shoes and add that variety. So you just want to think progression. And that's why we also see a lot of runners who get injured in the foot and ankle area in the summertime or in the beginning of summer, because everyone just changes to their slides and their flip flops, and their muscles have been in shoes supported all winter. And then you go out and then you try to walk, for a long distance. You're at a picnic or you're at a parade, you're going to the mall, you're shopping now in your flip flops, and your muscles have not adapted to that yet. And then you're also trying to run on top of that. So that's why we do see a little spike in foot and ankle pain and injuries in the summer. So the moral of the story is progression and gradually building up those muscles to be able to tolerate the demands of being barefoot or minimalist shoe. So, Matt, you have been extremely, extremely awesome. This has been great. I think, guys, if this was helpful for you, just type in helpful into the comment box for those of you here on the live. And for those of you who are listening on the podcast, definitely let me know if you have feedback and want to hear more things like this, because I would love to have Matt on again, honestly, on some other topics, but I want to respect his time. He's got a new little girl. She's going to be 6 months tomorrow, right? You said?
Oh, yep, tomorrow.
Tomorrow. So he's taking time away. So I greatly appreciate you taking your time away. But Matt, how could, if people really didn't know someone like you existed, right? We didn't know there was a Matt out there and there wasn't Woodbridge Running Company, and you didn't know it was this great running store right off of the Merritt Parkway in Woodbridge, right in the New Haven, Hamden kind of area. How can folks reach out to you guys, and what types of services are you offering now and or in the future?
Well, at the moment, the store is closed due to the orders from the governor. However, Chris, the owner, and Ed, one of my coworkers, they're manning the store between 10 a.m. and 11, or actually 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. So if anyone wants to contact them about either finding out about buying a shoe or ordering a shoe, you can either call the store 203-387-8704, or you can email at woodrunco@yahoo.com and just let them know what you're looking for, and they can definitely help you out. We do contactless pickup. We can also ship shoes to you. So there's a bunch of different things that we can do. I was speaking with Chris earlier this evening, and he mentioned also with the weather getting nicer, also we can kind of do a little bit of for somebody who is like a real newbie runner and really does not know what kind of shoe they do need. We can kind of offer a little bit of social distancing kind of assessment where we set up in the parking lot. We're 8 feet apart, and we can kind of watch you walk and do a little bit of an assessment and then kind of recommend some shoes for you. So yeah, reach out to the store, and there's multiple ways that we can kind of help you.
Nice. That's great. That's great to hear. And I know, because like I said, there are more people getting out there and getting active, and it's important to use the right shoe for you. So guys, those who are listening on the Healthy Runner podcast, we're going to have more education topics like this moving forward this spring as we grow the podcast. So if you have found this topic helpful, send me an email, Dwayne@sparkyourtraining.com, if you want to hear more topics like this. And those of you who are here on the live, if you found this helpful, just hit that like or hit the love button, throw Matt some hearts, for taking his time out and sharing his expertise with us. And I just wanted to, thank you, Matt, honestly, for taking the time to educate us. And thank you to everyone who jumped on the Facebook Live, or if you're listening on the podcast, or you're watching this on the Spark Your Training YouTube channel. I greatly appreciate that. And remember, every Monday night, we go live at 8 p.m. This was a special edition on a Wednesday night. So within the Healthy Runner Facebook group, So keep us in mind in your schedule every Monday night at 8 p.m. to get your questions answered, just like everyone got their questions answered tonight. So thank you again, everyone. Remember, stay active, stay healthy, and just keep running. Thanks a lot, Matt. Appreciate it.
Wayne, thank you very much. This was a blast. I really enjoyed it.
Awesome. Well, thank you. We appreciate you.